Hello, everyone. My name is Leona Watson, and I am a speaker and a coach, especially around leadership and entrepreneurship. And I'm super excited to be on the Online Prosperity Show, sharing some of the hints and tips of how I grew my business over 17 years and actually ended up selling, and also some of the big epic fails and the wins, and some of the processes that you could almost predict along the way that if you know about them in advance can just smooth them out. I'm really looking forward to spending some time with you.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today we have an exciting guest who is joining us. A guest who's not only an award-winning business woman, but also a speaker, coach, a team builder, and adventurer. Now, Leona, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. What about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. All the better for having seen you. I've heard your stories and your adventure tales, and I'm just dying to hear your side of the story. And obviously, that's the reason why we got you on the show today, because for those that are meeting Leona for the very first time, well, let me just take you out of the rock you have been hiding under, if she hasn't actually climbed over it. Now, like I said, she's an adventurer herself with a background as multifaceted as a Swiss Army knife. She's known for her fun, gritty, and honest approach. And I've also seen somewhere that she has been seen to be able to cook at a 45-degree angle. She's kayaked with killer whales. And one of the biggest things that I discovered, she's even sent an email directly to Bill Gates, and she actually got a response. Now get ready to be filled with laughter, wisdom, and I know a sprinkle of adventure. Now, Leona, I could go on and on. As you can tell, I'm already starstruck. I mean, obviously, we are all internet explorers here, and the people that you have met, the places you have been, and just tell us a little bit about your background and how all these experiences have shaped your career.
Wow. How far does the background, where do I start? So look, let's just sort of skip the first few years and let's just go into my first working careers, right? So for anyone here who's, been around for a few, they might remember the Life Bennett campaign. You probably mightn't, because coming your heritage from overseas. But it was all about getting people to be more active, basically to get them off the couch. It was all surrounding a cartoon characters called Norm and Libby. And that was part of my role. I was living out in M.E.D.I.A, so northwest Queensland. I was there for 12, 13 years in a mining town. And so I did that. And then I moved to Brisbane, and I was working in marketing and advertising agencies, and also in large event management, so organising days like, say, the Foster's Great Aussie Picnic with 100,000 people in a park, or the very first fun run over the Gateway Bridge with the Brisbane Bullets and all the sporting teams, and huge events. And then I was lured to Sydney because I came down for a little quick visit, and I just remember that moment. It was on Christmas Day, going underneath the bridge, with a glass of my very first French champagne, because, I was a girl raised in M.E.D.I.A, right? And basically that was cast wine back then. And I remember just being going under the bridge on this absolute kick-ass Sydney day, and I was just mesmerised. And so I went back to Brisbane, I resigned, and I was back here a month later. Got a job, and then a couple of years after that then I was in marketing. I was working more in marketing agencies, and then did the backpacking thing, which is the rite of passage for every Australian. And I got a one-way ticket to Athens, and I won't say it was that easy, being blonde and starting off in the the more eastern countries of Europe. But I was raised in a mining town, as I said, so you can kind of learn to manage that. And then I was lucky enough to get a job at Microsoft in the UK. And I guess that was that's another story, that one that you're just talking about. From there, when I got at Microsoft, like I got that job out of 200 people. So I felt really proud of that. But also at the same time, I was just this kid, right? But I ended up managing budgets of what would be today, like $50 million per product marketing budget, right? For launching products. And I think if I thought about it for too long, I would probably get a little bit stressed about it. But I'm just like, oh, well, it's just another zero in the end. I just got to, get on with it. And I learned a lot there. I grew up a lot in that role. I was forever grateful for that. But do you know what I did? I went on a tall ship trip, and one of the old, the old tall ships that first landed in Australia. And I fell madly in love with a sailor, who was earning about 30 quid, so $100 a week. Anyway, we both ended up back in Australia and up in the wet Sundays, which was when I had my stint working on a yacht. And actually, there's two things to that, which I'll just sort of jump in on. When I was on the tall ship, I had all the 4 to 8 watches, which meant I had all the sunrises and the sunsets. So it was a real time for being in quite that, raw money making or sales and marketing, real corporate kind of a job. This sort of skewed me into a little bit on the spiritual side, I guess, and really nature. It was my first real nature holiday, I'd probably say. And I remember one morning it was 4 to 8, and I was just out there, and I'd be sleeping I was on the big gym boom, which is the big netting that goes out, and that long, the piece of wood that's out the front there. And this voice just jumped into my head, like going, "You're in the wrong job. You're in the wrong job." And I was like, "Who and what is that?" And I went back and I resigned. It was such a definitive moment. There was just no doubt in my mind that that was the right thing for me to be doing. I ended up staying another 6 months, and it was great. Microsoft were really fantastic. And so then when I ended up on the Whitsunday Islands, I was, with the bloke, and then it was my turn to earn about $100 a week. I think it was about $1.12 an hour when I worked it out. Like, really. And that was when, as we were talking before about, learning to cook at a, 45-degree angle where all the food would just go flying the second you tack. I didn't know anything. I knew nothing about sailing. And this was a America's Cup Challenger. Like, this was the boat that they were training on when the Australia tour was being built, which was the one that we won the America's Cup the first time. So it was a big grind as the whole kit. And it was only myself and the skipper as the only trained staff on the boat. I didn't know what I was doing. Anyway, you just bumble along and get on with it, don't you? And that was also where I noticed how food really brings people together. Like, I'd be down below and people would just want to come and talk with me. Like, I'm in a tiny little area, but there was a place where people could just drop the facades and I was always amazed what people maybe I made them feel at home, but I think it's that thing in the kitchen, even though it wasn't a traditional kitchen, but people and so I started dialing that up, right? I kind of started dialing up, and that was kind of the start of thinking about how the beauty of food and bringing people together, which then became a company for me, like about, 10 years later, I launched Cheeky Food Events. But then, as all great, ship romances happen, it all sort of, after a couple of years, we sort of separated and then ended up down in Sydney. And that's where I've been ever since. And I was doing marketing consulting and helped launch Virgin Mobile, and I was at Microsoft. No, I wasn't there. I was at Optus. I worked to help launch ING Direct. I had some pretty cool, great jobs there that really stretched me. As a manager, as a leader. The marketing I was always, I think, pretty good at, or I could find out and learn. I was pretty curious always. But managing and leading is the next key things to learn, I think, anyone, especially when you're in your 30s and 40s. And then I launched Cheeky Food Events. And then I sold it just before COVID, and here I am as a speaker.
Fantastic. Fantastic. What a journey. I mean, we literally went around the world and ended up in Sydney back
We did
again.
actually.
And I really appreciate that. And obviously, I mean, your life story and your experiences, there's just so much to, to latch onto there. I'm going to start off with the first bit. You know, you did say, you were part of the campaign Life, Be in It. What was the environment like around so much that the government, or was it people decided, hey, people get out and do stuff? What was it
It was
like?
exactly that. It was a government initiative, and I think they're looking at bringing it back, which would be just sensational. So the basis of it was 4 by 30 minutes of exercise a week, and you can halve your chance of having a heart attack. Like that's what 2 hours a week. So that's pretty cool. I was always a pretty active kid, so we also did vacation activities, but being Mount Isa as well, like it only had a population of about 25,000 people. Um, you'd end up, as a quest entrant, any girl who didn't look like the back of a bus ended up being in a quest. You'd end up raising funds for something, and mine was for the National Heart Foundation, and but it was really about just getting people off the couch and outside, and that's been, I often talk about the golden threads that show up in your life. They're just little threads that they just appear consistently. And they're the little evidence, they're the little drops of things that you can bank on for yourself. And as a coach, they're the things that I try and uncover for people, whether it's one-on-one or as teams. And I think that's mine, is the bringing people together, creating a space where people can just kind of drop the facades and step up and be the best of themselves. When I mentioned about, on the boat, on the yacht, and just people talking in the kitchen, there was a moment about, I don't know, 15 even years earlier than that, when I was about 14, 15. And home life wasn't probably that easy back then, like sort of, go into too much detail, but it wasn't that great. And there was a bunch of us, teenagers who were used to just hang around all the time, meet up in each other's houses, and we're all a bit, I guess, desperate, I suppose, a bit lost, a bit lonely, I guess. And I remember one time we were at my place, and I said, let's just go and make some pancakes. And so we sort of, chipped a bit of money in and went and got, and I can distinctly remember that moment when everyone's just laughing, right? Half of them are burnt or they're raw, and it didn't matter. Everyone's just eating them. But it was just how, that's my absolute first memory of food bringing people together. And I just remember stopping and standing back and just looking at that and just going, wow. And I can still get quite emotional when I think back to that. There's just deep connections of joy and connection at that moment. And I guess that when I think about why I was successful at Cheeky Food Events, which was the world's very first team building cooking events company, like it didn't exist. Everyone sort of, everyone thinks that cooking classes now for corporates is pretty normal, but back then there was no Google, there was no MasterChef, there was no My Kitchen Rules, there was no Jamie Oliver. I think he was about 15 or something like that. And so it was sort of a little bit ahead of its time. But that was that little golden thread that just came up, and it had a great launching space to create these events at conferences quite often, where people could just, quite frankly, put the BS aside and just step up and be the best of who they are. Then they meet there, and then they're having a whole different connection relationship. So the conversations they'll have the next day at the conference, or the conversations they'll have when they go back to the office, they're just elevated because they're meeting each other here, not in the blah, the water cooler conversations and the whinges, and they've got a better job than me, all that sort of stuff. It just goes away, right? It just goes away. So there you go.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that, because with what you're saying, I mean, obviously all of this, you cannot connect the dots, looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards, which basically, is what you're calling the golden thread that pieces every part or aspect or phase of our lives. Now, there's a time when you said you were on that tall ship, and you were doing the sunrise sunset shift, and you literally had a voice that spoke to you at that particular moment. Was this the first time you had heard this voice, and has that voice ever come back again in times during your life?
Yeah, that was the first time. It was certainly, I think, the first time I probably had maybe enough maturity to recognize what it was. Now, whether you're someone who believes in the traditional version of a God, whatever religion that might be, and I have zero. I'm not. I'm accepting of everyone's everything, right? I think anything that brings joy to people is a good thing for everyone. And but that was the very first time that I did hear that. And I didn't even question what I didn't even question. It was so distinct. I didn't even wonder. I was raised Catholic, but I kind of then just sort of moved away from that. So it wasn't like I believed it was God. Is that an angel, or is that I don't know. I don't know. I didn't even question it back then. And now I do quite, like every Monday morning, I spend 2 hours with spiritual entrepreneur Pauline Wen, who's just sensational, and been doing that for about 4 years, and to just get stretched as a person. So if I get, it's not so unusual if I'm doing a meditation or an activation to allow little drop-ins. I obviously I go, do I want to do that or not? But I certainly allow them more now. I'm more open to them, I guess, is probably it's not so much allow, but more open to them.
Absolutely. Is this something that you think is available to everyone, or was this just a Leona experience?
No, I think everyone. I don't think it's just absolutely, hands down, definitely not just a Leona experience. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a change in the way the whole world is viewing themselves. Even think about, topics like courageous leadership and, empathy in the office. That stuff wasn't around 20 years ago. It was just, get it done, and sort of, and so that the world has definitely changed. And that's, I think, this little bit of I don't know, not an awakening necessarily, but a bit more of an awareness and a bit more openness to it. And if you look at how many people even just meditate now, but meditation doesn't have to be a, kind of a thing going on. I go and jump in the ocean most mornings, even in winter. And that to me is a form of deep meditation and connection, to nature and to the earth. And, it's hard to stuff your day up. If I start my day in the ocean looking at fish and then running around and having a laugh with friends, I have to really go out of my way to stuff it up for myself that day, because it's just so gorgeous, and what I think for leaders especially, because this is for a lot of small business owners within your group. Over my period of time when I had, cheeky food events, that was 17 years. That was a long time, right? There were definitely times in there where I pushed too hard, where I was an absolute pain in the butt as a boss and a leader, where I judged my staff, judged myself. Let's go harder. Let's do all of this, without doubt. And I also nearly lost the business a couple of times in that, where I think the worst of my leadership and management style was in full force, shall we say, which was chilling when you're under pressure. So over the years, I've definitely learned more about how to balance that high stress out of entrepreneurship and ownership and the responsibilities, and they're never ending, right? And after a while, your friends, your family, your partners, they get kind of sick of hearing about you whinging about it, right? So you've got to create ways to release and also to share with other people who understand. So networks are just incredibly important, and just to really love your company and fall back in love with it over and over and over again, just like you do a partner.
Absolutely.
Same thing.
Because you're spending 24/7 with yourself. The other people are just, in and out of that 24/7. So you might as well be friends with the person that you're with. And I'm supposing that is what would have happened when you were on that net, because when you're looking at the vastness of the ocean and you're looking at how everything is happening without your input, the sun is rising and it's going back and it's all in due course, and you're just a figment of that existence. I mean, one is bound to question their own, existence as well, and say, hey, who am I in the grand scheme of things? Am I just born to be the one that's stuck in traffic every single day, yelling at people at a water cooler, like you're saying? And obviously there, your existence comes into question, because none of what you were doing or you were seeing or what's happening around you required your input. And I would think maybe that's when...
Do you know? Oh, we can go deep on this, can't we? Look, I think that, we're all responsible for where we are, what we've got, how we react, or versus, do we react, do we respond? We can go sort of really so deep from a personal individual leadership, as well as leading others, being managers, growing your business, etc. Even right down to how you treat your suppliers. Some people are just lazy payers and they wonder why they get it back tenfold. Like, seriously, pay people, get it done. I honestly, for me, when I'm in those spaces of, I might be running in like Centennial Park in Sydney, and if I'm just like, oh my God, I just imagine getting some energy right up through my feet, from the trees and stuff. And I just go, yay. And I just feel ridiculously lucky. In those moments of pure beauty, I actually don't question too much. I just accept. I just feel ridiculously lucky, and I just accept the joy that's around me. But I also know I've made it happen. I also know that I've got off my butt. I got out of bed early, and I've put myself in a place where I can experience that. And I know that's good for me. I know it's going to mean I'm going to be in a much better headset all day. So if someone's really annoying, I can just go, does it really matter? Just let it pass.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited, for this conversation. And Leona, now that we've gotten off the tall ship and you decided this is not what I'm supposed to be doing, there would have been a bit of a fear that would have maybe come across, because you took a leap from your corporate job to entrepreneurship. And you know what I mean? A lot of people would have craved for that security, even though you were lying on that net, it's stopping you from falling into the ocean and would never have heard of you. Now, how has this sort of fearless attitude helped you navigate, the uncertainties of starting a new business?
To be truly honest, I did two things. One was, it would have been harder for me to not do it. It wasn't like, oh, will I, won't I? It was just how. And I don't know where that backing of myself comes from. I seriously don't know, whether it's just from having a bit of grit in the younger years. I personally think kids and everyone are raised way too soft. They're not allowed to fight for anything. They're not allowed their own hero's journey. They're not even allowed to walk home in the rain from school anymore. People leave work and go and pick them up, but I'm like, oh, let them get wet, So maybe there's that little bit of a grit that's been there. But for me, it was like, well, it wasn't what will I, won't I? It was, how am I going to do this? And I think one thing that I did that was probably, I thought about it, and I think it was a really smart decision, was for the first 3 years of the business, because it was a brand new concept. It wasn't like I was starting another digital online company or starting another accounting firm. There was no concept. There was no mentor. There was no how-to manual. There wasn't an accountant who could advise me on how to set up account codes, how to do a P&L. Nothing existed, right? So I think the smartest thing I did was I kept doing my marketing that I was, for 2 or 3 days a week while I was building the company. And then it got to a point where I was leaving work, going to do an event, coming home, doing proposals at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and getting up and going again, great energy. But I knew it wasn't sustainable. But it's a really good idea if you're starting out to hang on to something that, from a financial point of view, because when you start to make decisions under stress, you're bound to probably make the wrong one, number one. Anything you can do to hang on to having some money coming in will mean you are more likely to scale faster, even though you think you're not going in full time. This is just my experience and what I've seen with others as well. Secondly, it's a confidence base. That's where you can go, where you can just get stuff done, where your work's appreciated, where you appreciate what you do. And when you have that, like a confidence base, and when you have a financial base, that's a great platform to step out and do all of these other crazy new things that other people are maybe saying to you, don't do, stay with your stable, boring as bloody job, like these. So it's never a bad idea to keep something there as stable as you possibly can. And, but then I was someone who, I've never needed that stability, right? Probably because didn't really experience it. So for me, so when I went and worked on the yacht in the Whitsunday Islands, so I was went on the tall ship trip, went back to Microsoft and said, hey, Microsoft, I'm leaving. Stuck around for a few more months and then ended up back in Australia, worked on the yacht. When I got back from the yacht, I had a lot of people say to me, we were taking bets on how long you'd last. We thought you'd only be there for about a month because you're the big corporate girl, right? And I just said, really? And they just said, yeah, well, And what it was I was actually challenging their vision, their dream of running away on the yacht. Is that I was actually doing it. And I remember someone said, that's my kind of dream. And I said, well, why don't you do it? Oh, I've got a house. Why don't you rent it? I've got a car. Why don't you sell it? I've got and so there's always, but the reality was that they wouldn't be happy with my dream. Actually, mine wasn't even a dream, it was just something that cropped up and I just went, yep, M.E.D.I.A, let's go for it. I'm going to go and be with the man I'm in love with on a yacht in the Whitsunday Islands, wearing a sarong, cooking and then going snorkeling on the Great Barrier Reef every day. There was either that or stick with the same other job. It wasn't even a choice. But people need to work out what that level of security and base foundation is that they need, because then they can bump up and down. Now, some people it's up here. For me, it's really low. I don't need too much. I know I can just put a backpack on and get away with life probably for the rest of my life. That's okay. I'll be all right. But that's not going to work for everyone and it'll make them dead set and miserable. So figure out what that is and then know what your bounce around factor is around that. And I think that's where a lot of coaches and business owners, the quicker you can work that out means the quicker you know what your risk can be before you start to actually you'll start making decisions from a real space of fear, not joy and towards.
Absolutely.
And creation.
Yeah, because so many people just jump in and realize, oh, snap, this is not what it's meant to be. I mean, it's only Leona that could jump in or kayak with killer whales and still, walk out unscathed. But yeah, and that's the reason why so many people don't go past the 3M mark, especially when it comes to business. There's that statistic that businesses don't go past the 3-year mark. But you ran this business for 17 years. Man, that's a fit in and of itself. Do you miss it?
You know what? Funnily enough, had people coming back asking me about quite a few people come back to do cooking events this year, as well as doing some speaking beforehand, then do the cooking, take the learnings from the speaking. What do you want to be known for as a coach, a leader, a team, whatever it is, as a company, and bring that into creating their restaurant. And I've done about 5 or 6 events this year, and I've absolutely loved them. So whether it's with a CEO and executive team, or whether it's with 80 people at a conference. And I think it's now because I'm not running that business. Other people are doing that very successfully who I sold to. But for me, I can tap in and it's just the joy factor.
Mm.
It's just the joy factor, and which means that I can then double, treble down on the joy I can create for the people who are in the room with me.
Absolutely, because there's no attachment to all the hang-ups of having to wash up the dishes after.
I'm not sitting there in my head thinking, oh, gee, there's something else is here and that's the P&L gone on that job. And I'm just there to literally create fun, enjoy, and deep connection with people. Lots and lots and lots of mini moments of connection with people. Everyone goes to the big stuff and it's just lots of little mini ones. You just gotta set them up. And that's where people can, where they just slowly, they just reveal the best of themselves.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what the home represents, even though these days a lot of people are trying their best to dismantle that traditional unit. But homes is where dreams were spoken about on the kitchen table, hopes,
Yeah.
that's where a lot of learning was done. Mom's cooking, mom will be cooking on the side, dad is reading a newspaper or whatever it is. And I think a lot of people crave that because that's the unit we grew up in, even though, the society has decided otherwise. But that's what a lot of people are craving. And I'm thinking that's what you would have sensed or had felt in terms of bringing people together, because for them, they're reliving maybe their childhood memories in that particular moment, the sense, because it does take you on an experience. It could be a sense of onion, and it could be something that reminds you of when you woke up one day and mom was cooking up a storm and she hugged you and you just felt that alive in that moment. And maybe you have been bringing that back to people without you realizing the fundamental need that human beings have for that connection.
Do you know what? It's shifted over there. Like you look at, Gen Z now, like they haven't been raised without a phone. They don't know what it's not like. Now it's up to every family to determine what they do and don't allow, whether they do and don't have dinner together. And, I'm not a parent, I don't have kids. So it's very easy for me to point the finger and say, everyone should be doing this. But, I'm like, everyone's working hard and they're doing different things. They've all got different lives. So, but I think that anything that can bring people physically together. It's funny, like some of the companies that I consult with, and I speak a lot at the CEO Institute and with privately owned companies, 15 or 20, 10 to 20 people group, and then some really, really large ones. And they're all saying the same thing. They all want to try and get people, we're all, we don't feel like we're a family anymore. We seem to be missing that connection and stuff. And I said, well, are you all coming back into the office now? Is that mandated that it has to be a couple, 3 days, 4 days a week? Oh no, like it's. And I said, well, you can't whinge about both. You can't. You either got to step up and be mum and dad who says this is the way that it is, and the cards fall. I said, because for every person whom I don't say can come in every day, the world's past that scope, right? I think that's pretty much, those days are done. But I think that for every person who might leave you because they only ever want to work at home, that relationship might come undone somewhere anyway, especially if they're in the more front-facing jobs. Like, think of all the people who've been hired and they've never walked up to someone and just walked past their desk and gone, oh, g'day, how you going? Or like the Australian, the thing of, the great Australian compliment of basically having the piss taken out of you. That comes from banter and chat, and that's just not so easy on Zoom or on chat, especially if you've never met in person. So I think what you're suggesting there in relation to the biggest fears and worries that I hear from business owners and big corporate leaders of some very, very big companies is this whole thing around connection and the loss of culture and the loss of what do we stand for. And the first thing that I say is just you need to make it so that, everyone has to come back into the office for 3 days, 2 or 3 days a week, the same days. Don't have it rolled out where they're all separate. So that's just one thing I've certainly noticed around that.
Absolutely. And I can completely concur. And especially the last couple of days, Leona. I mean, obviously here in Australia, Melbourne, we were locked down for over 285 days. And in that time, the kitchen table became the office, it became the school, it became the restaurant,
Mm.
and it became the laundry,
A hairdresser?
and it became the hairdresser.
And
So
your hairdresser.
so pretty much all of that has just morphed into, and it became the office as well.
Mm.
It all just morphed
Yeah.
into so much that I don't think people have a way to find it. But maybe with your sort of background in marketing and all these corporate roles and knowing how it is to start a business, what are some of the suggestions that you usually leave with your clients, so that they can start incorporating that connectivity and also just spearheading and moving forward so they can create businesses that are profitable and enjoyable?
Yeah, I think the key that I try and do is I try and keep it really simple. So whether I'm there as a speaker or whether I'm there as a coach or a facilitator for a half day, 2 day conference, because if it's over complicated, like I see these matrices and we're going to have these 25 pillars and we're going to, oh man, you're doing my head in. And I don't like, nah, gone, too hard. And just get it really back to, what are the 2, 3 things that we need to be known for? We can all hang our hat on and feel proud about. And, I ran 2,500 team events, right? So I received and read personally 2,500, what's their company vision, their mission statement, and their company values. 2,500. I can pretty much guarantee you that I could, of those 2,500, I could take about 2,428 of those logos off and match them up, and you wouldn't know the difference between which company was what. And I'm talking really, some really big companies that should know better. The smaller, and really, like, honestly, if I saw the word integrity one more time, if you don't have integrity as part of your, seriously, you got to say you got integrity. You're a bank. And I'm not knocking them because it's harder when you got shareholders and all that kind of thing involved. I get it. But then it becomes about, what does that really stand for? What is that? Okay, if you're going to use something like integrity, what does that mean day to day? Let's just really look at that. That means if you tell your teammate that you're going to get something done by X, Y, Z day, bloody do it. That's integrity. Integrity isn't just honesty, it's how it plays out in each individual company is very different. And then, so my company, we ended up with coming up with we were fun and professional, were our top 2. Warm and engaging, because that was just part of our DNA, what we had to be and then passionate and innovative. But really it was all about fun and professional, not so frivolous that you get nothing done, not so professional that you're boring. But it's not fun if we've mucked up something and Leona, the boss, is on the warpath. Let me tell you, that's not a fun time. If we haven't, never accepted average, we're always, had to be really high. And but then we came up with own it, do it, smash it. So it's not just about words, it's about something that creates an energy, an excitement, a why. And it's about creating something that becomes then part of the DNA. So it's effortlessly moving towards that feeling, that intention. And if you can activate all of your teams, if you can get even 50, 60% of your people on board with some of those, then you start to create a movement. Like, in all honesty, you only need about 30, 40% before you create the tipping point, and everyone else just comes along.
Mm.
And over that time, I also saw the best and the worst of leadership and culture in action, right? I personally delivered about 800 events. That's a lot, and that might be CEO and executive team. It could be a whole company. It could be 300 people from a sales team at a pharmaceutical. But for the small businesses, I'd often see someone who starts out as an entrepreneur and they're trying to escape corporate. And then normally what happens, actually, here's what I notice a lot with entrepreneurs. It's almost the rite of passage. They get to that, they break through that 3-year mark. I kind of got through the really ratty years, but they're scrappy and they're kind of fun, right? And it's really high energy and it's kind of exciting, even when it gets really scary. But then you get over that. But you're still trying to be the entrepreneur. But now you've got a team of 5, 6, 7, especially when you get over 6, 7 people. They all want some infrastructure. What's my career going to be? How come such and such has got a faster computer than mine? We need a different telephone system. We need more space. And all of a sudden your overheads start going through the roof, but your profits don't. And actually your income often doesn't go up the same line. So a lot of people get really scared during that period. And also a lot of entrepreneurs because I was in out of entrepreneurs organisation for about 8 or 9 years, we tend to stuff it up for ourselves. We actually sabotage a lot. A lot of people won't admit to it, but I know that a lot of us actually do. Because we say on paper, yes, let's get a HR policy and let's do this, which is basically creating everything that they fought and run away from in corporate world. And then they have to start creating it in their own world. And this is where this is where the fight comes, right? And at some point, and this is part a lot about the leadership programs and things that I do, at some point, every leader, every single leader, every person has to let go of what got them to the level that they're at as a leader. What thoughts, beliefs, actions, and behaviours, results got you to here is not going to get you to there, because if you needed them for there, you'd already be there. These ones were good to hear. They're not going to get you there. You have to let go. That's hard when that's been a success base, right? Your little heart and your little ego is going, oh, let's hang on. But this here is calling you. It's like a whisper in your ear. It's calling you. But you've got to go out into no man's land for a bit. That's the massive discomfort for so many leaders and people within teams as well. If I'm not that person, I'm not that yet, then how do I I don't want to, honestly, they crumble a little bit. And there's often a space there that often corresponds with, it's like when all of a sudden an entrepreneur, they have to maybe go looking for investors. They have to maybe start talking with media, government agencies. They do have to employ a HR person. All of a sudden someone might sue them. All of a sudden they've got serious conversations with their banks. It's a grow up. Probably the shittier part of entrepreneurship, because you still want to be that scrappy entrepreneur.
Absolutely. See, when it's only you, I mean, certain things you could just sweep under the rug, but when other families are now getting involved, other organizations, and you did mention suppliers, it now the scope widens, and it's no longer just about you, and you can't crawl in fetal position anymore because everything is facing you. Now, obviously, I mean, your coaching and your team building sessions are quite known for being high energy and interactive, and I can so see what you'll be taking people through and how you work with them. What would be the best way that people can get a hold of you there, Leona?
Sure. Look, just, my website's really easy. It's my name, leonawatson.com, or leona@leonawatson.com. Follow me on LinkedIn. I put up quite a bit of content. I've got ones about how to recruit and keep A players, not stuff it up for yourself, because we do. I have as one, right down to just ways to keep yourself fun and well and active and part of the world, not where your identity is all caught up as a business owner. Another big one for business owners in particular. And that would be the main places, would be the website, LinkedIn, and you know what? Pick up the phone and call me. I'm old school. I'm not Gen Z. No, I'm not old, but I'm not old, but I'm not Gen Z either. I actually answer the phone and I enjoy it. I enjoy a chat. People don't call anymore. So, or send me an email and say, I'd love to chat with you for 20 minutes. Let's just do it.
Absolutely. Well, I'll definitely put all the links in the show notes so that people can actually get in touch and really get started on this journey. Now, Leona, I can't thank you enough for the time that we spent on the call today. And I mean,
Well, thank
obviously, your
you.
life story and your experience and how you've put it all together uniquely places you as the person that can literally give these leaders, as you keep referring to, as a rite of passage. Now, you see, when I was growing up, we were, when you get to the age of 13 or or maybe 16 for guys and 13 for girls, you were called in by the village elders, and they'll proverbially tap you on the shoulder, and then they'll tell you it's your turn to lead. And basically from then on, you are now on a trajectory to learn who you want to become, and be an apprentice to a trade that you feel will be a good part for you to then progress in your life. And I feel like this is what you're bringing to a lot of people who in this culture just grow up, go to kinder, go to high school, go
Mm.
to get married, you have children, buy a car, buy a house, and then it's like a Hollywood series or a Hollywood film, all for 35 minutes, that whole life plus commercials involved in that. So I
You know
think
what it is? Do you know what it is? Especially when I speak with entrepreneurs, it's and they just say, oh, blah blah, and they describe their biggest. I say, what's keeping you awake at night? What's that 3 o'clock brick on your chest? Talk to me about that, and let's just cut through all the other stuff. Let's just go straight to it. I'm a bit of a tough love with a smile kind of a coach, and and then they'll tell me, I go, oh, that. Oh my God, I've done that 3 times over, and I know someone else has. And all of a sudden you just normalize. And I think there's a part where we put entrepreneurs up on a pedestal, and they all go out there. This is something that I'm always prepared to share, which is my epic fails, right? Of which there are many. And I'm not one of the ones who say, oh, let's fail fast and all this sort of stuff. Bugger that. I don't want to fail too much. Like, seriously, I don't buy into the whole failure thing. But when I've done them, I've done them. But because we're putting people up on a big pedestal of being an entrepreneur, we haven't normalized the hero's journey. It's a journey. Everyone thinks it's going to go like this, and it's not. You go way off the chart many, many times, but it's how quickly you come back, right? And so the more I can normalize to people, they go, then they can just breathe again, and that's when possibilities come back in.
I like that,
It's when
because
you get in your head, you think you're the first person to have this problem, and 9 times out of 10, you haven't. That's why, again, like community, whether it's coaches, networking, people like yourself with all the things that you do as well. Like, that's why it's so important. You're not on your own. You're not on your own. There's always a hand out there.
absolutely. Now, taking your words, and maybe pointing them back at you. You started off
Mm-hmm.
this conversation with, your stint with Life Be In It, and you literally went on and lived that life. Because I viscerally believe we're here to live, to learn, and to contribute. And you lived that life. You went and learned the lessons, which obviously resulted in your successes. And now you're sending the elevator down to help others be, do, and have a happier existence. But if you would go back to the time, let's just maybe pick that time when you were doing the 4 to 8 and you were lying on that net, and you just were maybe not so sure what this voice wanted from you. And if you
Mm-hmm.
just woke up there and there was older you standing in front, what would you have wanted to hear from older you, knowing what you know now about life?
Gee, good question. Whoa, you didn't put that in the pre-information. Like, is this a bit of a question? Like, what would I tell my former self, my younger self, in a roundabout way?
Well, now that
Do
you
you know
know
what?
what.
Do you know what? Do you know what I think it might be? Is that basically you're going to stuff up, but you're going to make yourself ridiculously proud as well.
Like
And
that.
it's not about being arrogant. Like, yeah, I know I'm seriously bloody good at doing some things. I stuff up some other things. But there are so many things I can feel really, really proud of. And if you can hang on to that, if you can lock those feelings in, then you can recall them when you're down in the weeds, right? It's people sort of have these dizzy highs, but they don't lock it in. They don't lock it into their body. So they can just call on again and go, oh, Leona, you've done this before. You're good. You're good. So I get knocked down, but my ability to tolerate myself in that lower vibe, whatever it is, I can't tolerate myself there for very long. Plus, I've done a lot of like I've been studying neuroscience for 20 years, way back when it wasn't remotely trendy. It was some woo-woo weird thing. Now it's like people do a, Saturday and Sunday class and they're a, master. And I just, okay, what if? But, I've genuinely, and I brought it into my business. I doubled my business bringing that in. Oh, that's something we haven't even touched on. I literally doubled my business using a lot of the stuff that I use in neuroscience. And it cost me about $500 to implement.
Absolutely.
Just in my sales and marketing.
Absolutely.
So, keep learning.
I love that, and that is such profound message right there. Now, obviously, we know you've written a message to Bill Gates. You've swum and kayaked with killer whales. What's next? What can people expect from Leona now that you've won our hearts and we're on your journey?
Oh, aren't you lovely? Well, and next month I'm going to be going to Fiji on a sea kayaking and camping on deserted islands trip. So that is going to be, my heart is craving an adventure. It's been a while, right? I've been in a bit of business growth mode and got to go and do it. So that's what's next. And then I think there's going to be a bit of a stint overseas. So I'm going to be setting up some online group coaching that can work with that. But I think just continuing with the speaking, because then I can get to more people, right? And just help them all feel more connected with themselves than with others. I think, and joy. Chase the bejeepers out of joy every day.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I think just like you were bringing people together, you really, really brought a lot to this episode today. I mean, your experience is just phenomenal, and you sharing your incredible journey with us today just really highlights, like you say, we're not alone in all of this. I mean, your stories of resilience, adventure, and transformation are truly inspiring. So thank you so much.
Yours too. That's why I'm here.
Fantastic. And for those that are watching right now, thank you so much. I know this was a bit of a long one, but hey, if you come across a master, you might as well just stop and listen. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rewatch it again, because there's so many valuable takeaways that have been sprinkled in and around the journey that we took with Leona here. And if you think this is not quite your cup of tea, why don't you share this with a budding entrepreneur or somebody who's looking to get started in business, just so that they have an understanding of the undertakings and what is expected. I think Leona gave us a few hints on what each and every one of us can actually do. And while you're at it, I want you to type in the comments there, adventure, right? Leona is going to be looking at those comments at a later date, and she might just pick one or two of the people that have commented and maybe surprise you with a call. Like she said, she loves that call. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning into the Online Prosperity Show. Until next time, stay adventurous, stay prosperous. Bye for now.